Well, I have Mike here with me today. Mike, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
You've written this book, The Treasure House, Discovering Enlightenment Exactly Where You Are. Now, I haven't got all the way through it, but I am loving it so far. You not only bring some maybe difficult concepts and make them accessible to a layperson, but I want to acknowledge your writing as well. You're a talented writer, so
Well,
hats
thank
off to
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
So why don't we begin by you just giving us a little bio? Tell us about yourself, your upbringing, maybe how you got into spirituality.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I live on the Isle of Man in the UK, which is a small island between uh, Northern Ireland and England. Just in that gap in the sea, that's where we are. I've lived here my whole life. I was brought up here, and what made my upbringing a little different was that we grew up uh, in a Buddhist context. So my dad was a Buddhist practitioner. He was a lay Buddhist monk, and he also ran the local Buddhist group in the early 80s. So when me and my brother were little kids, there would always be, the house was full of people meditating and then sharing vegetarian food together, and then occasionally my dad's teachers, who were Burmese monks, quite renowned Burmese monks actually, I later discovered, would come from their monastery, which was in Birmingham in England, not Burma, but they were living in England too. So they would come over and visit and teach here, and we would take them out for tea, tea and cake or something in the local cafe. And I just remember these old guys, these old Burmese guys with little sort of tea cozy hats because it's freezing on the Isle of Man, and their robes are blowing in the wind. And we just go on walks with them and just look after them basically. Take care of them. Um, so I grew up with that, and we weren't Buddhist, my brother and I, but that was the worldview, which was different to my friends. It was different to everything around me, which was, I guess, Christian. But it wasn't until I was in my teens that I began a formal practice of meditation and began to explore Buddhism, especially Zen. I was always more drawn to Zen, Japanese Zen, uh, more seriously. And that was basically because by the time I was a teenager, like many teenagers, I was really struggling with myself and my mind, my mental health. And two things had always sort of stuck with me as a child about Buddhism and this worldview. Well, three things actually. The first was that the Buddha was an ordinary man. He wasn't a god, or he wasn't some kind of spiritual being. He was just an ordinary man like me and like you, a normal human being who realized this deep truth that allowed him this profound freedom that he could then share with people. So that was very new, coming from a Christian worldview. There's no way you get to be Jesus. You definitely don't get to be God. That's a remote figure, and it's historical. It's way back when. You approach that through faith and belief. Whereas the Buddha, it's still 2,500 years ago, but enlightenment, which is what the Buddha achieved, I came to see it's a living tradition, it's a living experience, it's a lived experience. And actually, it was when I got to my 20s, I suddenly realized that there are people alive right now who are enlightened or have this understanding. And that set me off to India to go and find some of them, which maybe we can get to later. But anyway, but so that was the first thing. The Buddha was a real human who achieved something that was actually achievable. So suddenly it became something that I could do as a 8-year-old kid. I didn't really know what enlightenment was, but I remember that desire. Oh, so this is the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to get enlightened. That's why my dad meditates. That's why these monks meditate. Okay. And I remember thinking, okay, well, if I don't achieve that at some point, I'll probably kill myself.
Mm,
Because there would be no point. What's the point of not achieving the ultimate thing? This was just a thought I had as a young boy, but it really did direct my life, you know. So that was,
sure.
yeah, that was one thing. That gave me that trajectory. The second thing was time. And, you know, I'm sure this is just something all kids experience, but time, you know, like where's the moment that just happened? Where's last
Mm,
Tuesday? Like, you know, I remember seeing a car driving along the promenade by the beach, you know, a car, and I could see it moving, but I didn't know why I still couldn't see it where it had come from, you know, like a single line, you know, like if you blurred it into slow-mo, you could kind of see it.
sure.
It was just disappearing and appearing as I was watching it. And I just remember thinking, that's just really strange. You know, like, is it there? Is it not there? Why can't I see where it's come from? And yet I know it's, you know, traveled in that direction. So then there's just theme of impermanence, you know, there's something very mysterious happening all the time that no one's talking about. You know, everything is
Right.
basically
It's
appearing.
kind of right in our face.
Yeah, and you know, just no one's mentioning that. And the third thing, which is the no self or not self understanding, which again, that really fascinated me from an early age. That idea that there is no fixed, genuine core or pith self inside of us, some sort of fixed me, that doesn't exist in the way we think it exists. And that really resonated with me. Of course, I had no idea really what that meant, but just that whole theme that you're not what you think you are was another sort of driver for my practice, but also for my anxiety and depression because, you know, do you exist or not? And that is a very existential thing to deal with as a teenager.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So maybe let me unpack some of that. So growing up under this Burmese worldview from the Theravada tradition, within it you have the Noble Eightfold Path, and you're taught kind of uh, this worldview that says I'm interconnected with all the rest. There's this selflessness and this impermanence. So did you connect with that at an early age? Was it just conceptually, or were you able to really feel into that as a child?
um, do you know what? It was all around me, um, but maybe in a more general way. You know, certainly when I was younger. But really, yeah, as you say, the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths. I mean, we weren't indoctrinated. You know, it wasn't like my dad sat me and my brother down and said, "Okay, you know, boys,
Yeah,
here's what you do." No, it
sure.
was, you know, um, but yeah, it was hardcore Theravada. You know, it was really pay attention, train your mind,
Yeah,
concentrate, you know. Um, what I do remember is things like the Jataka tales, you know. So my dad would read us the stories of the Buddha's animal lives, you know, these sort of the legends of the Buddha as a, I don't know, as a monkey or then as a cow and then as a, you know, I remember those stories and the moral in the story and how, you know, he'd often sacrifice himself to save the other animals and you know, so because as a kid you love stories, so I remember those stories. But the other thing
right.
that really stood out, that wasn't really to do with Buddhism, but of course really interconnects with it, was I was always very sort of, well, scared of death, dying. Um, Again, I think this is probably normal for young kids, but you know, I was just very sensitive to those themes. I was kind of obsessed with war, and again, as lots of kids are, but I was obsessed with the military and military history and certain battles. But at the same time, if I would notice the veins in my hand or arm as a like a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, I'd get really freaked out and panicky. And so, yeah, very sensitive and very kind of acutely aware of death and I guess just the underlying terror of life, which is death, which again
Yeah,
isn't particularly Theravada, but that I think that's another reason
sure.
I sort of drifted into connecting with Buddhism and Zen.
Yeah. I asked that question because my kids right now are 10, and then I have twins who are 12, and then I have a 13-year-old boy. And it's just been interesting watching them develop and, from 6 to 10, kind of before they come into that ego or stronger identity, it's almost easier to connect with some of these deeper principles of selflessness and interbeing. And yeah, it's been interesting watching them make that shift into the ego. And it's almost creating a little frustration exploring some of these concepts. So I wondered what your experience was growing up in a home that seems somewhat similar.
Yeah, yeah, similar. I don't remember really sort of, kicking back at any of it. I was more, my dad was always like a friend. I always remember him more like a friend, and I just remember pestering him with questions, philosophical questions, which he would always say, just Mike, you think too much, you know. But I would say, but you're the one doing these practices and reading these books, and I'm just asking you, if there's no self, then how is karma created? Or, and he's like, no.
Yeah. No,
Um,
that's my 13-year-old boy. He's endless questions. It's just
yeah, yeah. But we have a similar situation here with certainly with my son who's 12 now. Uh, and again, I've not they know what I do and they see me meditating and they know teach mindfulness and this kind of thing. But I came home the other day and my son um, was sitting in my room, my kind of office, if you will. And I came in and he just said, "I've been reading your book."
I love it.
Like he'd caught me out or something. "I've been reading your book." And I'm thinking, well, what the hell have you just read?
Yeah. No, I've got a similar situation. My 13-year-old read my book too, and yeah, just loads of questions. And my approach has been to not force it on them. It's like I knew what that was like growing up in a Mormon household.
Right.
And so it's like, I'll live by example. If you're interested, you can ask questions.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there's a different dynamic with me being their teacher, homeschooling them,
Mm.
because we have explored both Western and Eastern philosophy. So there is that element, but I'm not trying to push anything on them. It's just, hey, here's some ideas to explore.
I agree. I
But
agree. And, you know, because we're all different and, intuitively we find our way, don't we? Whether that's, some Western philosophy or an Eastern mode or, some sort of Christian mystic or, just whatever it is. Like when my kids were very little, we lived near a park, big kind of park, and we would go there a lot. And right next to the park, quite weirdly, the Isle of Man is an odd place in many ways, but there is a full size sort of recreation of the apparition of the Virgin Mary in Lourdes in France.
yeah,
So there's a Catholic church just next to the park, and they've literally made a cave. They've made this huge sort of mock-up cave, with a statue of the young girl who saw the Virgin Mary kind of praying, and then just next to it is a garden with the Stations of the Cross, full-sized, huge statues of Jesus in these different stations of the cross,
yeah,
and it's intense. I mean, even just if you're not even Christian, just
sure,
looking at those statues, you can tell there's a lot of it's
yeah,
suffering, and he's going to be crucified. But our son
yeah,
was obsessed, fixated. I mean, he had no idea what it was.
Mm.
This is when he was really little, but he'd rather go and walk around the Stations of the Cross than play in the park, you know.
Mm.
And we always kind of joke like he's going to be a Christian something, you know.
Sure.
But we've all got that intuitive pull.
Powerful imagery. Yeah.
Powerful. It is powerful imagery. And I resonate, you know, I'm not, um, you know, I say to people when I teach, you know, I'm not Buddhist or I'm not religious.
Right.
But I'm, you know, pantheistic. I'm all religious. I mean, give me Sufism, give me Zen, give me Christian mysticism, give me shamanism. There's so much of everything that I find beautiful and wonderful, and often
Yeah.
adds to the picture rather than takes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a both and.
Yes.
There's truth everywhere.
That's
Yeah.
it. Mm.
So maybe we can get to your other interest in time later, but I want to move to the existential kind of crisis because where I'm at in Utah, it's a highly Mormon populated state. This is kind of the church's headquarters, and there's been a mass exodus the past several years, and it's difficult when people leave behind a framework, you know, when everything kind of crumbles beneath them and they've been conditioned uh, to, you know, everything that they're doing is meant for this afterlife. And so when that kind of crumbles away, they're like, well, what does it all mean? And this existential dread takes over, the depression sinks in. And so, yeah, I'd like to kind of pull on that thread a little bit and ask you about your own journey there.
What my existential crisis?
Yeah, as a teenager, right?
Yeah. Well, I think there were two. There were two major ones. Hopefully they're finished.
Okay.
Hopefully they're finished now. But there's, you know, well, the first one, yeah. I mean, it relates back to time. So I never wanted to. I never felt like I fitted in now in this culture. You know, I always would rather have lived in ancient Japan or ancient India or I don't know, the Viking Age or the Saxon. You know, just not now. You know,
Sure.
and I don't know why, but I'm fairly obsessed by history. I always have been, you know. I love ancient cultures, North American Indian culture. I would have loved to have lived, you know, in Utah on the plains, and you know, something like that. Just not this modern, postmodern culture. Um,
Sure.
so I never really feel like I fitted in, and but you know, you're surrounded by stuff. And I don't know if you've ever read Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre, um,
Mm,
but he talks about the nausea is this sort of, it's like a sickness when you realize you're just surrounded by crap, like just
hmm.
stuff that is just nothing. It doesn't mean anything, you know. And I remember thinking, and this would make me really sad and really depressed, you know, like like a toy, like a plastic toy or something. And I think, you know, someone's made that. Someone has made that toy, or they've been working in a factory that makes that toy, and it's just useless. It's rubbish. It's going to be thrown, you know,
Back
onto.
in the earth.
It's just
Yeah.
going, and for what, you know? And that would really depress me that
Yeah.
this culture
Sure.
was so full of sort of meaninglessness. Yeah, I guess that was it. And then when I was 18, 19, I got my first real job, which was in a bank. There's lots of banks here. It's an offshore center for banking and things, so it's quite easy
Okay.
to get a bank job, and a bank job is a good job to have. But I really wanted to go to art school. Like, yeah, I just always wanted to create. I'm a very creative person,
Yeah.
and so music. I'm a drummer. I played in bands. I wanted to paint and write, and but I ended up in this for money, of course. You know, we need money. There's no money in playing drums. So in this bank role, that was just the worst place I could possibly end up, you know, for many reasons. The work was meaningless to me. absolutely meaningless, especially when you're surrounded by people that's their life and they love it, which is fine. But I am the odd one out there, and I just got more and more depressed, and then I was given sort of sick leave, by the doctor. You signed off, so I don't have to go in for 3 weeks or something. I can't remember how long, but I was allowed to spend time off. And I remember being offered medication for my depression and anxiety. Um, but that was a real shift, because I remember in that moment thinking, all of my anxiety, my emotion, my internal chatter, all this difficult content that I'm dealing with is in here, like it's mine. It's happening within my own body and mind. So surely there's some way I can navigate that, because it's already
Mm,
here, like it's my content. So
yeah.
that was really the trigger that day, even for my formal meditation practice. So running home, grabbing my pillow, folding it in half, you know, sitting cross-legged on it, and trying to meditate. Not really having a structure yet, but my dad that was then living in Israel at the time, and I remember calling him up and really, really upset and lost, and saying, what do I do? And he basically taught me how to meditate over the phone, you know. And then that was it. That was my daily practice. And within about 6 weeks of daily practice,
And it was a Vipassana approach.
it was Vipassana. I mean, that's what my dad taught.
Okay.
So that
Right.
was
Okay.
that's the system he trained in, and that's what he
Yep.
taught as well. He's written lots of books now, but even at the time he'd written a few sort of training manuals on Vipassana, So
Yeah.
it was just kind of observation, focus your mind, find the breath,
Sure.
just observe. Um, and then, yeah, like 6 weeks later, it was like I'd woken up from a dream. Like I just felt
Hmm.
like I was present and clear-headed and calm. And then sort of synchronistically, my external circumstances began to change quite quickly. And I left my job. I found a new job in the film industry, and then things just sort of basically opened up for me. And I spent the next 10 years doing a lot of traveling to India, and did a couple of degrees in religious studies and Western esotericism. And basically, the next 10 years were seeking, like going out into the world and seeking enlightenment.
Mm. Yeah. Something I've noticed just across your platforms and in your book, it seems you hold quite a respect for some of the earlier traditions, like the Theravada, as well as the later non-duality traditions. I often find a lot of non-dual teachers kind of hold this superiority complex over some of you know these earlier traditions, but I find Vipassana invaluable. I take both of them as skillful means, um, but do you want to walk the listeners through uh, the different approaches, or kind of this development from the seemingly more dualistic observational approach to this non-dual approach?
Yeah, that's a great.
Big task.
Yeah, but there's so much in it. There's so much there. Yeah, I do have a reverence for the traditional approach, because it works. Um, and I also love the non-dual approach because it works. But what I also and I find pros and cons with both, and it's really just more intuitive, and it depends on the person you're dealing with, I
Yeah,
think, because you can get stuck in that dualistic vipassana,
sure.
endless retreats where you're still hoping to get it.
Striving,
You're
striving.
striving, and the striving is the
Yeah,
thing that's in the way. You don't know that just behind that thought is a limitless ocean of expansive
right,
awareness. It's just there. But also, I've
right.
met, I've met, and to me, to some extent as well, but I've met people who've had non-dual awakenings, or certainly have gone down a non-dual. Well, it's not really a path as such, but non-dual direction, and they're having these moments of oneness and kind of expansive no self, but it just doesn't last. And the mind gate crashes back in, and they get anxious again.
Right.
They get depressed again
Right.
because there's no skillful means. They don't know how to deal with
Right.
that. They're just sucked back in and thought, oh, I thought, or worse, oh, this is part of it too then. My anxiety is part of it. Now, okay, ultimately, it's all it, you know, it's all just reality happening, yes, but being dragged into your anxiety isn't freedom. So, yeah, I think you need the skillful means, and that really helps you when it comes to understanding your non-dual nature. Uh, but for me, I definitely started in that dualistic mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was your dad's approach kind of like the Mahasi Sayadaw, U Pandita lineage?
I don't think it was completely that, but he was very familiar with that. And now he may correct me on this, so don't take this as gospel. But I think his teacher, Rueta Dharma, and Mahasi Sayadaw were either friends or at least connected. You know, there's these high level Burmese Sayadaws that all kind of knew each other and taught each other and were in some sort of, they were connected. But yeah, it was more just, Vipassana, insight training.
Yeah. So more of a noting, just simple enough to frame the experience, not
Yes.
to get lost in the concept. But yeah, I just find that invaluable because, with the non dual approach, you can strip away the illusion quickly. But as we're navigating our lives, um, you know, when we're practicing noting aspects of our experience, it just gives us an awareness of certain dimensions of our being that we can then, work skillfully with or be more aware of. Um, so, yeah, I really appreciate that kind of Burmese
Yeah.
approach. But
Yeah. And funnily enough, when I grew up, I mean, obviously I started there, but the more I grew up, and I would attend my dad's retreats in India. We went to India together, actually, when was it, 2002, I think? Just after 9/11, anyway, I can't even remember. But just after 9/11, we went to India, and he would go there and teach in Bodh Gaya, and I would just attend the retreat and hang out, and then I'd head off and, spend time traveling around India. So, yeah, so I was, yeah, a student, I suppose, of my dad. And but then, because I guess like most children, you like to veer away from what your parents have done, you know. So there was that sort
what?
of,
No.
well, maybe not everybody, but
No, I'm kidding. Oh, yeah.
yeah. So there was a
You got
point,
to make your mark.
you've got to make your mark, and I can't really remember what it was, but I somehow came across. I mean, maybe it was Nisargadatta or something that was just like, it was like it smashed a wall down, I was like,
Mm,
oh God, right, this is, and I didn't quite understand it because it's so direct.
mm,
I didn't even realize what he was saying. I knew he was this enlightened being, but what do you mean what do you mean just be? What do you mean, just rest as awareness? Or what do you mean follow the sense of I am? I mean, you're not really giving me a method. But that's the
yeah.
beauty, if you like, of the non-dual approach. There's no method. You're
Yeah.
already here. So I then sort of went off on this non-dual adventure for many years. I still had my practice, but the two sort of came to a head when I was 29. And I'd had lots of glimpses of glimpses of kind of no self or not self, which they wouldn't really come to practice, even though I had a meditation practice, um,
Sure.
which was more just about, as you say, like knowing, like, okay, I know there's a thought and I know there's a sensation, and you're just like this constant, observation, witnessing, knowing of what's happening in your direct experience. Um, Life changing, absolutely life changing, that approach. But it began to sort of, it wrestle with this non-dual approach, which is, well, who's practicing? Ah, okay. And actually, my dad went to see Papaji when he was in India. And,
Mm,
I think he found him somewhat useful, but I don't think he was too impressed.
sure.
I think there were a lot of people in the room who, they'd have the smallest glimpse and they'd kind of be like, "Oh, I've got it." And he would say, "Oh, yeah, you're done.
Yeah.
Go back to America and teach people."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my dad coming from
I've
this,
heard
like,
stories
yeah,
with him, and then I don't know, students would go from him to say Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, Tibetan master. And there's a story of one woman who Papaji said was fully enlightened, and she gets there and she's like, "Yeah, I haven't had a thought in days." And he, of course, just a brilliant moment of teaching, sits down and is like, "Okay, we're just gonna wait for you to have a thought."
it's great. It's
But
great. So,
yeah. But
yeah,
anyway, sorry I interrupted you.
yeah, no, but exactly. So I was having these glimpses, but they were all terrifying. Like, just all terrifying. Like moments where I became aware that it wasn't me speaking. Now, not to say it was
Yeah.
somebody else speaking, but there was no one in here doing the speaking, you
Yeah.
know,
Just the speaking.
just the speaking, just the seeing, just the hearing.
Yeah.
Now that's the liberation right there. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
but
Right.
that's not what happened. It was, oh, I'm going insane. I'm going mad and I can't get out of this non-dual.
Oh,
Actually, I didn't even know it was non-dual. I mean, yeah, I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was.
sure. Sure.
Um,
But it was unpleasant though.
yeah, it was
There was a fear to it.
terrifying every time.
Okay.
And it makes you think, do I want this? If this is how it's going to be, so that would happen. That was fairly constant. And I remember you begin to see in that way as well, as in you begin to understand that that's really what's happening here, meaning there's really nobody in here or in there, you know,
Right.
like we were, my friends, we all were having pizza or something once and my best friend is there and we're laughing and joking. But I remember looking over it at him and suddenly realizing, oh, he thinks there's someone in there. And that was so like heart wrenching and tragic, you know,
Mm,
like there's just no one there that you need to maintain or strive or care for, like you're already
right.
free in a sense. Um,
Right.
but yeah, for me, it was always um, terrifying and anxiety inducing uh,
Mm,
until I was 29 and I had my second existential crisis. Um, I mean, I've said I mentioned this in my book, and I've mentioned it a few times, so I don't really want to go through it again in lots of detail. But um, I basically quit. I quit practice. I quit seeking. I quit everything because I realized that all of the seeking had just led me into depression. I was just depressed. I wasn't enlightened. I was depressed and anxious. And
yeah.
I kind of realized I wasn't going to get like it wasn't going to happen. That project was not going to happen, Mike. It's like trying to be a millionaire. Like, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a millionaire. This is going to work. And it was like, nothing's going to work, you know?
Yeah.
So there was like a dead end in front of me then. Like, okay, I don't know what to do now. And so I sunk into a big depression. Luckily, I uh, had the sort of self-care drive to go to therapy or counseling, just talk therapy, just talking about.
Yeah.
I realized that my meditation practice, I was using often as a hideout, a bypass.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so there was a hell of a lot of stuff that was just there, and I hadn't ever vocalized it or verbalized it and I'd always been very, you know, dismissive of that because, oh no, my practice is going to bring me to enlightenment. Don't need this, don't need that, just my practice, just noting thoughts, breath. That's
Yeah.
what's going to do it. And it didn't do it. So I went to therapy and I began to feel much better. I really dived into it. There was no hesitancy. I dived straight in. And for the first time since I was, well, for the first time ever, I finally began to feel like Mike. Because there's no
Mm.
self-teaching. I was trying to not be Mike. Oh, there's no one
Yeah.
here.
Right.
The personality is an illusion. So I just spent a long time trying not to be Mike. And then finally, I suddenly felt like it was okay to be a person, finally, just to be an
Mm.
ordinary person. And then within, I don't know, a week or so, I read a book in a library by Rupert Spira. I came across one sentence. That was it.
Mm.
My mind stopped. Everything stopped. And there was just this, well, it's hard to speak about because there were no words at the time. But
Sure.
to put it this way, my search finished. It just went like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
And
The striving fell away, and
everything,
just the pure acceptance of what is.
yeah, yeah. There was no one in here. There was no one out there. There was nothing to do. I was
Yeah.
everything I was experiencing, but there was
Right.
nobody in here doing it all at once. This beautiful collapse. I used to call it a collapse.
Sure.
Um, yeah,
So this gets at 2 points. A lot of people on the spiritual path, they'll come to one of these experiences, which we might call a peak experience, and then they fall in the trap of, oh, that's it. That's what I'm trying to get. And so then they start seeking this
yeah.
peak experience again. Was that your situation after that?
Not after that. Previously, I had. Previously,
Okay.
because there were amazing flow experiences. So there was terrifying experiences. And then,
Sure.
like, I was in Paris once, and I mean, I remember waking up and just feeling different, like really calm, not a lot of noise in my head, which was quite rare for me. And I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we're just spending the day in Paris, cafes and walking around. But I was much more quiet than usual, and I had the sense that everything was just happening by itself. Like
Mm.
everything I said, with the way I moved, the traffic, everything just seemed like a dance. And
Mm.
I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to like, hey, and something weird's happened, because it was weird, but it was really comfortable and expansive. So that was a nice experience. But usually, as I say, they were terrifying. But if something like that happened that was really nice, or sometimes I'd go and visit a guru, and I remember one guru would give us this sort of darshan eye contact, where you sort of scan the room and he's sort of staring at everybody. And my mind just stopped. And
Mm.
it stopped for about 3 hours. I mean, I was waiting for the train on the way home, and I'm just thinking, well, I wasn't thinking, when is this going to start again? So I'd had those, I guess, kind of peak experiences. And then, of course, the mind comes in and says, I want that. That was it. That was definitely it.
Right.
How do we, I'd have to go and stare in his eyes again. Where does he live? You know,
Right. Right.
the thing that happened when I was 29 was much different and way more simple. And it was just the end of me. That's the best way I can put it. It was the end of me.
Mm.
And that's how it's been, since then. Um, and yeah, so it was like the ultimate relief.
Yeah. Ah, just
Yeah.
all that weight
Oh,
put it
that was
down.
it.
Yeah.
And when it happened, I burst into laughter
Mm.
because it was so obvious. That was what made me laugh. The thing I've been searching for in books, in gurus, in India, here, there, everywhere. It was always here. This awareness is what's here, and this awareness is appearing as the objects you're experiencing. I mean, it's all just it sort of seeing itself, hearing itself, being itself. Like, how can you
Yeah.
miss this?
Yeah.
So for me, that was the end of seeking. Like, there's nothing, that's it. There's nothing more to do.
Right. No self to do it.
That's the end. That's the end. But of course, it's not the end, because then we're creating like it's a concept that it's the end. Oh, now I'm done. Well,
Yeah.
who's done? Which takes me back to, it's taken me a while, I think, to see where non-duality and the more dualistic practices kind of come together.
That was the next point I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
This aspect of kind of growing up, because
Yes.
you're not done.
No.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets very Zen. I think this is what Zen does very well. There's no end.
Yeah.
There's no like, and I would think like, oh, I'm done. Now, okay, there's no one in here to say I'm done, but the thought would arise. There's no end. There's no end to this. I mean, and even if we just conceptually include rebirth, which I don't know, I have no belief or disbelief in that.
Sure.
We don't know what this is, and I always think it's interesting when certain teachers, someone will say, oh, how does consciousness work? And they say, well, here's how it works. But that's all just more
Sure.
concepts,
Sure.
like
It can't be reduced or explained away. It is
this is
pure awe.
yeah, and this is why I love Zen, because that was my experience. This can't be thought, said, written. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
Blink and you'll miss it. You cannot grab hold of this. You can't form a structure about it in your mind. So what do you do? Well, if you've experienced that yourself, there's nothing to do. I mean, you could talk about it, of course, but you're well aware that the words on the menu is not the food.
They fall flat.
They fall flat.
Yep.
But then, because we are in this rapidly shifting experience, time, back to this.
Yeah, I was going to say, to tie it back
Yeah.
to your second point on time.
So that is practice. Like, practice only works because things are rapidly changing. Like a practice is a movement forward, or even if we say, oh, well, there's no future, there's no past. Okay, but there's certainly this ever-changing now. This present moment now is not the same present moment that was happening 10 minutes ago. So it's not like you're done, because that's fixed. Who's done? And when does done happen? There's just, I can't even say what this is.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Yeah, I found Korean Zen really useful in that aspect too. Just sitting with, what is this? It's not like a conceptual, you're not trying to answer it, analyze it. It's just bringing it back. What is this? What is this? Yeah.
And this is, I think, with a lot of non-dual people as well. Certainly, I mean, some teachers. I mean, I gained a lot from many very popular non-dual teachers. Who they really ramming home the sense that there's no one there. There's just no one here.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the teaching. You don't need to meditate. There's no one there. From a Theravadan perspective, that's just sacrilegious nonsense.
Sure.
There's no skill. There's no skillful means. I actually took a lot from that, I think, because intuitively I understood that. I always had this sense that there was no one in here in some way. So that sort of gave me some external validation. Oh, well, if they're saying there's no one here, that's sort of how I felt my whole life. But the downside is, and I know this has happened to many people, you can go into a talk and someone says, okay, yeah, there's no one here. You're done. And they go, oh, great, I'm done. And then they carry on.
Yeah.
And what they've done is they've just understood something intellectually, which they'll forget most of the time. And worse, when they're angry or greedy or they're causing some trouble, they'll just say, well, it's all just this, though. And I've met people who do that. It's all just this.
Yeah.
So we'll take drugs, we'll drink alcohol, we'll, misbehave because it's all just this.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
the flip side
N-
of sorry, just to finish that thought, but the flip side of the
No, you're good.
awakening is not some sort of dead, dull, Theravadan observation where you're removed from life. It happens in the heart. You know, like
Oh yeah.
you fall in love with everybody. That's how I felt. Like the awakening was, I am in love with everybody. So
Absolutely.
there's no sense that you want to misbehave or cause trouble, or because that's what everyone's doing anyway, because they don't see
Yeah.
the truth.
Yeah. It becomes a very creative, a participatory experience upon recognizing that you are not apart from me. There's this natural compassion that unfolds. And yeah, I don't forget that John, me here, is a person in the world and that I have experiences of sorrow and pain and
Mm.
all the rest. So yeah, there's still a lot to do. Um, so I know we're running up on time, but I loved this part in your book. You had a line that just really stuck out to me, but it gets at this emptiness through a different door, the door of free will or the lack thereof. And you set this up beautifully. You tell a story about your grandpa that was a pilot or
Yes.
he was in the war. And yeah, they were flying through some clouds and they noticed an enemy plane nearby in the thick clouds and they hadn't noticed your grandpa yet. And your grandpa and everyone on the plane were saying, "Well, do we engage? You know, what's the approach here?" And your grandpa said, "You know what? No, let's head back. It's best not engage." And later it turns out it wasn't just one enemy plane; it was a whole fleet. Uh, so then I don't know. Later on, you talk about how many causes and conditions bring us to where we are, and what may seem like a decision we're making actually depended on all of these decisions and causes from the past. But um, you said, if I could control myself, something like this, if I could control myself, I'd have to control the universe. I loved that line, but I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about emptiness from that angle. Love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So everything, even this conversation now, the fact that you're interested in these themes, at all, and that I am too, and that, we've connected like this, and the technology exists. I mean, you can take any strand of any of this and follow it back to the birth of the cosmos, if indeed there was a birth. You just follow it back. Um, and yeah, just that realization that we're not self-propelled, we're not self-driven. We feel like individuals. I'm doing this. You know, but actually, even if you think I'm doing this, you're only thinking that because you were taught the English language. Like even your thoughts are in English because you happen to be born
Exactly.
in an English culture. So,
Right.
and you look like you look because of not just your parents, but your ancestors coming through in the way your nose is or your eyebrows or whatever it is. Um, and then of course it's all rippling forward from us as well, based on what we're doing, how we're using our minds and our actions, and what we're passing on to our children and friends. So it's just this mind-blowing sort of river, you know where everything is caused by something that happened upstream 10,000 years ago. you know um yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, if your grandpa had engaged, yeah, would not be here.
there would be no conversation happening.
Yeah.
But of course, it's
So,
the same with everybody. You'll have your version of that
of
story.
course,
The
of
listeners will
course.
have their
Yeah.
version. Um which I mean, in that chapter also points to the sheer preciousness that we exist at all. Because
Yes.
the likelihood of you existing is basically zero.
Unbelievable miracle. Yeah.
Unbelievable miracle. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it has been a real pleasure, Mike. I really appreciate your time. I want to remind listeners again to check out your book, The Treasure House. It's on Amazon and you can find it on Audible as well. And on your website, I noticed that you do mindfulness for kids and teens.
Hmm.
So, love that. If any parents are interested in checking out some of that work, go ahead and visit Mike's website at mikekewley.com. And I'll put it in the podcast, so the links in the podcast. So, is there anything else you want to tell the listeners? Anywhere else you want to point them to, your work or?
No, I think that's it. I just want to say thank you, John. It's just been a really interesting and, beautiful conversation. It's really nice to connect with you. Me on the Isle of Man, you in Utah, and yet, I feel like I feel like I know you, and that's just lovely. And I really enjoy that connection you can have with essentially a stranger. And it shows us how deeply and connected, we all are.
Yeah, well, the feeling's mutual, Mike. Thank you again.
Thank you, John.
All
Thank you.
right, take care.
Take care.